It had taken some time to reconstruct her personal life. Even in 1969, 4 years after she left Doc, she still sometimes felt like she was walking around Monrovia with a scarlet D embroidered on her dress. Whenever she had to fill out a form that asked for her marital status, she hesitated, wondering if she would be marked as a failure. She was still using Doc's name, finding herself unable to drop it. The name kept her connected to her boys, she felt. It showed that the 5 of them were still tied to each other. In the months after she left Doc, she had moved in with her mother. Martha Johnson was supportive of her younger daughter. The physical scars, apart from the one on Ellen's neck, had healed, but the emotional scars were still there. And Martha was using the Liberian woman's go-to method for helping one's child, prayer. She prayed for her daughter morning and night, that she would heal from her bruising marriage, that she would escape the buzzsaw of Monrovia gossip. But Monrovia society was moving on too. In the late 1960s, divorce was becoming increasingly common. Of course, it was usually followed by 2nd, 3rd, and 4th marriages, and there Ellen was deviating from the norm. She had no intention of tying herself to a man again. Eventually, Ellen moved out of her mother's house and into her own, and slowly she began acquiring the confidence that came from making her own living, collecting her own paycheck, and answering to herself. She had only one son, Rob, living with her full-time. Adama was still in Yekapa with Doc's brother, and Jess and Charles were still at their mission boarding school upcountry. But even as her personal life was still fragile, Ellen's professional life was flourishing. Freed from the control of an abusive husband, she was outgrowing her position at Treasury. She had a comprehensive view of the economy of Liberia, and she enjoyed trying to tease out the numeric answers to the small questions of interest rates and financing that came across her desk. But the Pekin who was not easy was not satisfied. She had already started questioning the absurdity of the 2-tiered structure of which she had become a part. The Congo elites had embraced her. She was, after all, light-skinned and beautiful and had a white grandfather. But she had not forgotten her Gola roots and moved easily in and out of the different strata of Liberia's classes, even as she grew uncomfortable at the contradictions. Enter Gustav Papanik, a boy wonder economist visiting Liberia for the first time. Papanik was head of the Harvard Institute for International Development and had spent much of his time traveling the world, from Pakistan to Iran, giving economic advice to struggling developing countries who needed it. Arriving in Monrovia in 1969, Papanik saw on the surface a bustling, vibrant small town. At fewer than 100,000 people, it was a town of churchwomen in wide-brim hats, a Fanti cloth head ties on the market women who sold cola nuts by the side of Old Road, of single-breasted tuxedo jackets worn by the men in charge, who sipped Chivas Regal as they preened in plastic chairs at the executive pavilion. But for all of its Western aspirations, Liberia in 1969 was an economic mess. During the 1940s, while Ellen was growing up in the family house on Benson Street, in the 1950s when she was attending high school, the country had registered staggeringly high economic growth. From 1954 to 1960, thanks to a rubber boom led by the Firestone rubber plantation in Harbel and the rapid exploitation of the country's iron ore deposits, growth in production and income had shot to 10%. Only Japan performed better during that same period. Unfortunately, those numbers masked a chronic and familiar narrative. The rich were getting steadily richer, and the poor were stuck. This was all quite evident to Papanik. Most of the growth was generated by a handful of foreign firms.